Hi, my name is Levi.
I'm Patrick.
And this channel is called Levi and Patrick Went to the Movies, where we discuss a movie that we both love every week. We've been absent for a few weeks, but we're back. So please like, comment, subscribe, ring the notification bell, because sometime soon we might be talking about a movie that you love. Which could be today, as we were talking about Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve.
Denis Villeneuve's.
Denis Villeneuve.
Prisoners. Okay, so Prisoners came out in 2013, and I saw it twice in theaters. The first time I saw it, I was with a friend, and it was just her and I, and then two people in the back of the corner, and they were talking to the whole thing. And when it comes to talking in theaters, I personally give like a 15-minute leeway, right? Like maybe you're settling in, just some slight discussion, like, hey, you got the popcorn, whatever. But after 15 minutes, it's like you need to shut your mouth. And so I turned around and told them to shut up. And then it was just kind of awkward for the rest of the movie. Because then there's always a risk. Because if someone is rude enough to talk during a movie in theaters, if they're rude enough to do that, then clearly they're selfish and they don't care about other people. And so you run the risk of telling these people to shut up. They might then be the type of person, if they're already talking in a movie disrespectful, to then respond more so disrespectfully.
Oh, you just go right out and tell the theater managers. Be like, hey, somebody's talking, they're really loud, they won't be quiet, I would like you to remove them from my experience.
Yeah, but then you miss like 4 minutes of the movie.
Then you make them rewind
it. And it was my first kind of intro, well, everybody's intro, to Denis Villeneuve, right? Because he had done a movie before, a couple movies, one with Jake Gyllenhaal. He then immediately came on my radar. And then Sicario came out. I believe that was his next movie. And from there it was like, done deal.
Done deal.
We're done. So very early on in movies, there's always a moment within the first, say, 10 minutes where I'm either going to love it or hate it. And there's usually kind of an extra special moment where it's like, oh, I'm really going to like this movie. And for Prisoners, it was the characters are introduced, they're walking over to the neighbor's house, and they're like setting up, eating dinner. And then when the girls leave, as they're getting kidnapped, there's a shot of the house in the background, and there's a tree in the yard. And the shot is just kind of slowly pushing in on this tree, and you just hear it like creaking from the cold. And it's this incredible shot, and I knew then, that moment, I was like, I'm going to love this movie. And what's funny is I just recently watched it with one of my other friends, and I was telling them that story that I just told you. And they were like, yeah, but what did that shot mean? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what it means, but it's incredible. Like, it just makes you feel something. And I think I just like the idea that this tree felt ominous, even though it was just a tree. I'm sure there's some sort of, like, analytical breakdown, which, as you know, I'm not a fan of. But kind of beyond that, they decided to film that shot. Like, they had to set up the camera, they had to do it, they chose the shot in editing, that the whole sound design, everything. So it's like, they put it in there for a reason. Obviously, mood, like, feeling. But in terms of what is it supposed to mean, I'm not sure.
Well, the opening shot is a snow-covered forest with trees.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's not like trees are a theme.
No.
That's when I knew that I was in for a treat. And then, obviously, from there, the movie just gets better and better and better. And then shortly thereafter, it's the scene where Jake Gyllenhaal is at the gas station with the RV. And the lighting and the rain. And he's, like, silhouetted against these really bright white gas station lights. And just... It's just incredible cinematography. It's Roger Deakins, who, you go up to his IMDb, and it's like the most beautiful films of the last however many years. Kind of when we were talking about The Village, Roger Deakins did The Village, that if you pause it at any moment, it's like a poster. Prisoners, not as artistic in the sense of some of the scenes are more traditionally filmed. However, there are so many shots in this movie, like at least one per scene or two, where you could pause it and be like, that's a poster. And one thing that's funny is I always have associated the gas station scene in Prisoners with the gas station scene in Toy Story, because it's kind of the lighting is kind of similar, just like gas station, bright light, white, and then
the pizza truck.
But the vibe is similar, people get lost around this time. Anyway, it's an association that I have. Another major thing that I want to get out right away is that the Duffer Brothers, the creators of Stranger Things, watched this movie and loved it so much that then they had an idea for a show that was going to feel like Prisoners. It wasn't going to be based on Prisoners, but it was going to be like the idea of like a kidnapping, and it was going to be like a long-form version of Prisoners. Well, that idea slowly turned into, through creative process I, Stranger Things. So it's crazy to think that completely unrelated in like actual real world ways, but if Prisoners didn't exist, Stranger Things wouldn't exist. And it's also kind of cool how both of them are incredible.
Yeah. I didn't see this movie in theaters. I saw it per recommendation of Levi. Same with Sicario. I hadn't even thought of what it was going to be. I had no desire to see it. And then he was like, you have to see this movie. Okay. So I watched Prisoners, and it was incredible. And then I went to see Sicario in theaters. I remember he told me to go, and I was like, all right, cool. I have no idea what this movie's about. I went and saw it.
We will be talking about Sicario in a future video.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah, we will. One of the things I love the most about Prisoners is kind of like moral ambiguity, because Hugh Jackman obviously is doing something wrong, but for the right reasons. And then, so it's kind of like a mislead. We're on Hugh Jackman's side, and we're like, that guy is the bad guy, and the cops aren't going to do anything. So he kidnaps him. It's like, oh, okay. Well, after the clues, or like the thing he says to him in the parking lot, and then him singing that Jingle Bells Batman Smells song with the dog, like, oh man. So like, we already know. There's not a doubt in our minds. It's like, this is the guy, and the cops aren't going to do anything. So Hugh Jackman kidnaps him to torture him, and then it starts to come about that it's not him. So the whole moral ambiguity thing, like, we have to switch sides, but we still feel for Hugh Jackman. And then toward the end, it turns out that it was him. It just wasn't him alone, you know?
Yeah.
So,
well, there's even a part too where when they first announced, they got the sketch of the other guy, and it's like, cops are looking for this dude, and Terrence Howard is like, it's the other guy, and Hugh Jackman's like, they're working together. He said to my face that he cried when he left him, so he knows where they are. So even when doubt is starting to get cast, yeah, you still feel like, well, this Paul Dano knows something.
mm-hmm.
But I do really like the idea of how far would you go if it was like your daughter's life on the line.
Mm-hmm.
And Terrence Howard has a great moment where he's like, despite what you think of me, I would die for my daughter, but this is not right.
Mm-hmm.
It's cool how you get different perspectives of kind of the same horrible thing from these different characters.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're all involved.
And even when he brings his wife in, and it's like, is she just here to judge whether they're doing the right thing or not? And then she goes to talk to him about, like, more of a compassionate approach, like, help us find our daughters, like, her stuffed animal, whatever. And so she unties him, and then obviously it blows up. But like,
because he hears Hugh Jackman's voice, he's saying, help me, and then he hears, Russell, you want to help me? And then he freaks out and tries to get out.
I didn't associate that.
Yeah,
But,
so, interesting, sorry to interrupt your thought, but maybe if Hugh Jackman hadn't been there, maybe it would have been more successful.
I don't
Because
know.
he only freaked out when he heard his voice.
Oh.
Yeah. Cool. Continue.
Yeah. Anyway, so with the moral ambiguity thing, like, we assume that she's going to change something, but then she is more on Hugh Jackman's side, where she's like, we're not going to help, but we're not going to stop him. If he wants to do this to get our daughters back, we're going to let him be the one to do this. And so it's like the different perspectives, on the same crazy thing.
This movie does a really good job of setting up character exposition without explicitly saying, like, well, I was blah, blah, blah. Like, you get a lot of shots right away of his truck. It says, like, Keller Dover repair, house repair, whatever. So you know he's handy. And then when he goes to find his daughters, he's like, before they leave, he's like, don't go in the basement. And then there's a shot of him when he's looking for the daughters. He goes in the basement. And, like, you see, and it pans over to, like, the gas mask thing. And then, obviously, of course, there is dialogue where he's like, your granddad said, be prepared, whatever. But all of that stuff kind of builds together that when he then is torturing this dude, one, you buy that he knows how to build it, right? Because he is a plumber, handyman. But then two, his character has been established as this kind of survival is key man's man, and you accept that he tortures him. Whereas if the movie was centered around, like, the regular everyman, like Terrence Howard's character, for example, you wouldn't really buy that he'd be able to torture somebody. Because not everybody has it in them to just straight up torture, even if you think that they're the person, right?
Yeah.
So there's just a lot of setup in the first couple scenes that you just believe it.
And I love when Hugh Jackman's wife is crying in the bed, where she's like, "You were supposed to be able to protect us from everything. You, not that it's his fault, but she was like, I was supposed to feel safe. You were supposed to keep us safe." Whatever that line is.
She says, "You made me feel so safe. You were supposed to protect us."
Yeah.
Which then...
That hits so hard.
Which is cool because then what Hugh Jackman does next is go kidnap Alex.
Yup.
And there are several moments, actually, where someone will say something directly to a character and then their reaction is the following scene. Like, for example, later on in the movie when Hugh Jackman identifies the sock from his daughter.
Yup.
He says, "You've wasted time following me. You did this, right?" Well, then the next scene is Jake Gyllenhaal looking at this dude, like, angry, and he goes in there and he's like, "Come on!" And he starts hitting him, and then the dude shoots himself.
Yeah.
But he only reacted that way because Hugh Jackman made him feel like a piece of crap. And so there are several huge character decisions that are made that directly follow, like, a very emotional upheaval, which is nice.
I love that moment, that line, because he's looking, he sees the sock, and he's like, "You wasted time," but he's also kind of talking about himself in a way, with the wrong perpetrator, who, again, turns out to kind of still be involved. But yeah, that's such a strong emotional moment and a strong scene. Especially Hugh Jackman sitting out there without his wife in the waiting room while the other two identify photographs, and then they bring him in, and then we see him looking at a bunch of wrong photographs while he's like preparing himself to see pictures of his daughter's blood-covered clothing.
Yeah. Yeah, because at that point, too, the dude confessed. The crazy guy with all the snakes, he confessed to killing these girls.
Yeah.
And so Hugh Jackman knows that, and he's just waiting to see pictures.
Oh, man. When Jake Gyllenhaal goes to the guy's place and then, like, gets inside and then has him down handcuffed and goes and opens that door and we see all the cases on the floor, like, what is actually happening? And then, obviously, we assume that we're going to see these little girls inside of these cases. And then when he moves the clothes and it's snakes, it's just like, why? What is happening? First off, where and how did this crazy guy get these snakes? Like,
well, the mall.
The mall, yeah. To put them in here with these clothes that's covered in pig's blood. It's like, it's just, it seems so random.
Yeah, but it's not, because they allude to the fact that the husband would have snakes around the house.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which probably is a religious thing, because they talk throughout the whole time. That's another theme throughout that I really like, is how Hugh Jackman is very religious, and then the people that kidnap his daughters are, like, anti-religious.
Yeah.
Although, weirdly, no. They believe God is real. They're just
mad at him.
Mad at God, right? Because he killed their son. But there's just a lot of religious whatever. And it actually has a really great moment when... So it opens with Hugh Jackman saying the Lord's Prayer.
Yep.
And then later he says it, but when he gets to the forgiveness part, he can't say it.
Yeah. Well, and also, he's saying that prayer before his son shoots a deer.
Right.
So later he's saying it when he's in the room with Paul Dano, like, is he about to murder him?
Oh, interesting.
But he can't bring himself to finish the prayer and then do it. I don't know.
I don't know if he was ever...
I don't know, but it felt like it because of the beginning where they shoot the deer. It's like pre-penance. I don't know.
Interesting. Well, it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is to ask for permission.
Well, he's permissionally forgiving himself ahead of time. It's a weird gray area. Toward the end, where Hugh Jackman realizes that it was the old woman, and then he goes over to her place under the pretense of helping her fix stuff up. Is it because Joy said you were there?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then he thinks about, where have I been the last 4 days? And it's really been 2 places, except for that random third, the house.
And it took me a second to put that together, where she was like, you were there, and I, for a second, was like, this is a weird turn. Is she trying to say that he was involved, and now they're all going to turn against him, as if Hugh Jackman had something to do with their disappearance? And it was like, no, not at all. You were there because she heard his voice when she was being held captive. Click.
kind of early on in the movie, Jake Gyllenhaal suspects Hugh Jackman, right? That's a little subplot where he sees the room, he sees the lie on the ground that's half opened, and then his wife is like, he's helping the police, and he's like, yeah, we both know that's not true. But as an audience, you never once suspect Hugh Jackman because there are no... You're with him the whole time, yeah. It would have to be some sort of really crazy twist ending that it means everything we watched was a lie, which is just kind of hokey. So I'm glad that they didn't continue down that thread. Plus, obviously, the whole movie is him torturing somebody, so it doesn't make sense. Why would he torture somebody that kidnapped his kid? Anyway, doesn't matter. Going back to Exposition, we are introduced to Jake Gyllenhaal's character, and it's Thanksgiving, and he's eating alone in a Chinese restaurant, which is kind of like the cliched joke, you know, it was even in like the Santa Claus back in the 90s, where it's like, yeah, Chinese places are always open on the holidays. Anyway, the point is, you get that it's his character, like he's alone on Thanksgiving. But what's funny about his character is there have been so many kind of discussions online as to why his style is the way it is.
Jake Gyllenhaal?
Yeah, like he's got tattoos on all of his knuckles. He's got tattoos on his neck. And he's got like this huge ring on his finger, and like he's texting somebody when he first meets the mom, and he just kind of seems like he's got a tic, you know. But that's never explained, which is fine. You don't need to, but it's just interesting to think, why was he all tatted up? Did he have a troubled past? He does talk about how he grew up in a Catholic school, or he went to a Catholic school. Whatever.
When he goes to the priest's place and finds that thing behind the fridge, and then goes down there, it's like, this is not the kind of movie that's going to have a jump scare. So when he's down there and it's like, what's he going to find? Is he going to find like the girls tied up, and then the rest of it is just like a whodunit if it wasn't the priest? I don't know, but it was so early on in the movie. But it's not a jump scare kind of movie. The whole movie, you're kind of on the edge of your seat, whether it's waiting for information or waiting to see a character react to something, but you're not waiting to see like a reveal.
Right.
And it's so well done because, well, the moral ambiguity thing, the intensity of all the characters' emotions, like those are the reasons you're on the edge of your seat.
I talked about that shot of the tree at the beginning. Well, there are many other great shots. One of my favorites is obviously the gas station with Jake Gyllenhaal walking up and he's silhouetted. But then when they're searching for the girls, there's a line of flashlights and it's above the trees, and so you see like the dark silhouetted branches. The when he's driving to the hospital at the end and he's all like, Rachel, stay with me. There's like kind of a wide shot over his car, and you see all of the cars on the other side and him driving, and like just the way it is with the brightness and the oranges, it's really good. I think one of my favorite moments is when he at the Candlelight Vigil. Like, there's no like creepy music, but like you see that dude and he's like touching the bear, and Jake Gyllenhaal's like eyeing him down, and then the dude like looks up and then slowly looks over and then sees that he's being watched, and then slowly rises and then walks through the crowd, and Jake Gyllenhaal's walking through the crowd, and then he's gone, and then you hear shh, and then the lights, and he's running in the backyard. It's just like it's such an amazing build up.
When that dude is sneaking into their houses, is he gonna kidnap the other children? No. But it's like, oh my god, what's going to happen? What is he doing? And then it seems like he did nothing. So what's the point of it? Until the end, of course, while he was stealing their clothes.
Yeah. Which I love that moment when the parents, Terrence Howard, they come back and the daughter's not answering. And he's like about to break down the door, and the daughter comes out and she's like, yeah, screw you, that's what you get for leaving me alone. And then she just drops on the floor, and it like cuts. Another amazing scene actually is with that dude, the guy who breaks in. When he goes over to his house, you were talking about how when he breaks in there's all the snakes, but their dialogue before he gets in the house is so good. Where it's just like, oh, you shopped them all up? And he was like, yeah, you know, I can't afford Brooks Brothers. And then Jake Gyllenhaal laughs. He's like, you bought children's clothes. And like the way he says it is like accusatory, but not really. I mean, not directly. Yeah. And then the guy is just like, I must have made a mistake. And then he says, do you have children? And then he whispers, no. It's just such a great moment because you're like, what's in that house? You know, snakes.
Snakes. And a pig's head in the sink.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, one thing I've always wondered, and if anyone knows, maybe you could tell me. That book about the invisible man with the maze, that's the dad in the basement. Because the author is a guy who was kidnapped but didn't remember it, right? Or no? And then the forensics guy was like, yeah, it's all made up, whatever. But that's probably the dad in the basement, right? The maze guy.
I think he wrote that book.
No. The priest that Jake Gyllenhaal arrests, who has the dead body in the basement, who turns out to be the husband of the kidnapping lady. The priest says he said that he kidnapped 16 children. And then there's this book out that has the maze on it that describes people telling their stories of being kidnapped by this person. Because they wouldn't kill all the kids, because Jake Gyllenhaal says that creepy dude with the children's pig's blood clothes was kidnapped and drugged to the point where he didn't remember, but then they find out that he was when he was younger. So he was obsessed with this book because he knew that was the guy that kidnapped him.
Okay. Right. That makes sense.
But it never explicitly states in the movie if that's who it is, but the mazes lead you to believe that it is.
He's got the necklace.
Yeah. And so it's just, I love how the main mystery obviously is where the girls are, but there's so many kind of little mysteries that are misdirecting you the entire time. Like, there was a guy who was kidnapping children back in the day. His son died of cancer, so then they kidnapped Paul Dano's character, raised him as their boy, who turns out to be the boy that the old lady is talking about. So when the RV is parked in front of the house, that's where he used to live, right? And then also this weird creepy guy who collects the clothes, he was kidnapped when he was younger, but he would just steal clothes because he's play acting, so then the clothes is a misdirect, and so it's just like all these little mysteries of what's happening. And really, Jake Gyllenhaal thinks he's solving where the daughters are, but most of the time he's actually solving this old mystery case back in the day. And so that's why it gets all crossed.
Well, skip all the way to the very end. Do you think they save Hugh Jackman?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like ambiguous only in the sense that it doesn't show you what happens.
Yeah, but he's got the whistle, and he's probably not going to stop blowing it.
Yeah, there's no reason not to believe that Hugh Jackman doesn't find him. And then he goes to jail. Probably... Actually, you know what's funny is he probably goes to jail for a long time, but not as long as you might think.
Yeah.
Because if he had a good lawyer, it'd be like, look, this was all the evidence that happened, and it turned out that this guy did technically take his kids. So it's like, maybe he'd get a reduced sentence.
A reduced sentence.
But that's one thing that I love, kind of like the tragicness of his actions, is that he gets his daughter back, and then the next day goes to jail. So then he'll be gone for 5 to 10 years.
The whole time that he's in there, he's going to know that he did the right thing. His daughter is alive and safe, probably coming to visit him, etc.
Yeah, but he didn't do anything to save him.
Well, sure he did. He may not have been successful, but
So he did nothing to save them.
No.
If he was successful, that would have led to their saving. But they didn't.
Well, why did Jake Gyllenhaal go to that old lady's place at the end?
Because his captain tells him to go. Jake Gyllenhaal thinks Hugh Jackman is leaving the hospital to go to that old house. And so Jake Gyllenhaal's like, I know where you're going, He drives over there. Hugh Jackman's not there. Mm-hmm. He finds Paul Dano.
Yep. And
then later there's a scene where the captain in that house is like, you gotta go tell Paul Dano's mom. He's like, what? I don't wanna. He's like, come on, go do it. So that's why he drives over there. Yeah. And at that point, she's like, well, I'm pretty much done because Hugh Jackman found out. He probably told people, so I better kill this girl. Mm-hmm. And she's about to die at that point. That's why she just basically kills herself by shooting at a cop. But anyway, no, so Hugh Jackman didn't do anything. Joy escaped on her own. Hugh Jackman went over there and... Oh, that's... Obviously it's a movie, but one thing I always thought was like, come on, guy. Is after he chugs the thing, like he's in the kitchen and it shows him like, ugh. So he's weaker, right? Slower. But when she's walking him to the car, she's like this close. Mm-hmm. He literally, all he has to do is quickly turn around and he could easily just knock it out of her hands and push her over. But they established that his drugs are kicking in. That's why in the kitchen he does the... So it's like, technically the movie told us, and so we have, Yeah. Because if he wasn't drugged, he'd be like, what? What's he doing? And I've obviously never had a gun pointed at my back, and so obviously, whatever.
Well, and but also, halfway on their walk to the car, he still doesn't know that the hole is under the car. So he's like, if he were to attack her and get the gun, how's he going to find his daughter? He has no idea where she's being kept.
Well, he's experienced with torturing. I think he could torture an old lady. But even when they're in the car, she's got the gun right here, and he's like right here. And it's like, you could just...
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? Maybe I'm being naive. Maybe I've seen too many movies, but it just... Hugh Jackman's like 6 feet, 12 inches, and she's...
I do love the moment where he's like, I'm not getting in that hole. If you want me to get in there, you're going to have to shoot me. And so she shoots him.
Why doesn't she kill him?
Because she wants him to still be alive when she dumps his daughter's body down.
Yes, evil villain.
Monologuing herself to death.
From the villain logic. I guess she was going to do it in the next 10 minutes, though.
Yeah.
Because she then went in the house to kill the girl.
Yeah.
So. Could you imagine being down that hole in the dark and then it opens in your daughter's body? Just
No, I cannot. That's...
Well, he'd have something to eat. He'd lived down there for a while.
Yeah, she put a ham sandwich in the daughter's pocket.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, this movie is, I would say, difficult to watch. But what I mean is, like, it's really emotionally stressful.
Plus, a lot of the details are in the dialogue, particularly names. So it can get confusing trying to remember who's who that we're talking about. Because some characters kind of have, they're like briefly mentioned, and you don't really, like for example, when after he captures Pig's Blood Boy, right? His last name is Taylor, and so him and the forensics guy are talking about Taylor, but you would have to pay really close attention to get that dude's name because they don't talk about it a lot. Mm. So that scene where he's explaining, like, Taylor was kidnapped when he was a kid, like, maybe upon first watch, I know I didn't, like, he couldn't keep all the names straight. And, like, even Alex Jones is named something else, which, actually, I wonder if it's a meta joke. At the end, the villain girl is like, I don't know if his name is Barry or Larry, I forget. It's like, yeah, so did I. You know? But yeah, I mean, the characters or the actors are acting the crap out of their roles.
Yeah, everybody does such a good job.
Yeah. There's one thing that I always think, though, that every single time I see this shot, I can't not think this thought, which is when they're in the living room talking about the girls are kidnapped, and it's all the adults, and the kid is like, Dad, the RV. There was an RV right there. And they're like, whoa, blah, 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 and they all, like, move and go out of the room. It feels like improv. When I was in college, I was in theater for, like, a hot second, and one of the exercises we did, which was actually my favorite exercise, but it was the whole class, so it was like an hour and a half, was just the teacher gave us, like, oh, the tornado sirens are going off at school. Go. And then so you all had to, like, through improv, like serious improv, not comedy, you had to, like, make your character and do the situation, and it, like, evolved from there. Well, every time I see that scene, for whatever reason, I associate it with that moment. And so now whenever I watch it, it's just, these are adults just improvising, like, I'm going to go out to the back, and like, I'm going to get my coat, blah, 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 and then they, you know.
Interesting.
Yeah. Which makes it, which is frustrating because it's like, right away, the kids are being kidnapped, and there's just like this little silly thought that I have. Like, it's not the movie's fault. And then, of course, Jake Gyllenhaal in Toy Story. Tree shot, sold me right away at the beginning, then the Jake Gyllenhaal scene at the gas station, but the scene where he's questioning Paul Dano, and it cuts to quiet shots of the RV and the stick, and it's overhead, and all these different things while they're doing the investigation. That's where the movie was then elevated. Like, I knew it was going to be great, but that scene was like, oh, this is going to be the version of this suspense thriller genre of trying to find missing people. This is going to be an exceptional version of that.
Yeah. I gotcha. I was just thinking about, like, where he's at the door and he's like, you bought children's clothes. You know, like, that kind of, he knows something is off when he's trying to question them to get them to slip up. Mm-hmm. When he does that to Hugh Jackman at the liquor store, when Hugh Jackman comes to the car, right? When he's questioning him, all of Hugh Jackman's answers are decently legit.
Yeah.
And it's just so good. Where he's like, you were walking away from the store, and he's like, well, sometimes I come here and I walk around in the parking lot so that I don't buy alcohol. It's been 9 years. Look what you did.
What's interesting about Hugh Jackman's character is that when, after that scene, Jake Gyllenhaal Googles that address, he's like looking at 124 Campbell Street or whatever, I think it's 234. Oh, yeah. Anyway, in the article, when he finds it, he finds out that it's Hugh Jackman's place because he reads an article that says Hugh Jackman's dad killed himself in that apartment complex.
Yeah.
And it's such an interesting, like, traumatic kind of experience for Hugh Jackman's character that is not mentioned at all other than if you were reading that article. But again, kind of like the names, you wouldn't really put it together unless you had Keller Dover memorized with then the information the captain says after Hugh Jackman attacks Paul Dano. He's like, I know your father was a guard at Graterford, and I have respect, whatever. So you only get those two pieces of information, Dover and Graterford Guard. And so when you see the article, it just says Rutherford guard, so-and-so Dover, kills himself at home. And then you see the address. The focus is on the address, but his dad kills himself, which, in terms of film theory, again, we're not a fan of. You know, I say that a lot, which means whatever. But that explains maybe a whole lot you could extrapolate about Hugh Jackman's character. Primarily being why he's never fixed the place up. Like he says at the beginning, it's for money, which is what the movie tells us, so that's the reason I go with.
Well,
however,
probably more than one reason.
Right. However, you could then say, well, maybe he doesn't like being in there because that's where his dad killed himself.
When he's in there and Jake Gyllenhaal shows up, so he goes downstairs and it's like, what's gonna happen? And then he's pretending to be passed out drunk on the floor like he slept there. It was so good. I love that because, I don't know, what would I have done? Probably try to hide, but then if he just found the Alex, it'd be like, okay, well now I have to stay here until all these cops are gone. You know, so it's like, no, he laid down, pretended to be asleep, passed out, drunk. It was just a really good, smart move.
Another interesting thing about the movie that I like is Jake Gyllenhaal's relationship with his captain.
Yeah.
Because it's like seemingly disrespectful. Like he tells him like shut up all the time and you F off, whatever. And the captain is like, nah. But then they seem to be fine. And there's even that scene after they catch the weird dude with the pig's blood clothes where the captain and him are having a moment. He pours his drink in his, which is funny, but
yeah.
He's giving him kind of like fatherly advice in a sense. And then, but he says to find meaning in life or whatever, get married and have a couple kids. I was like, it's kind of an inappropriate thing to say right now because Hugh Jackman's upset, or Jake Gyllenhaal's upset that he didn't save these kids. And it's like, think about children.
Just make some.
kids. You know, like, hey, don't remind me. But anyway, because in any other job, you'd think they get fired. And so I like that when the writers were making this movie, they just established that that's their relationship. You don't need to know their backstory, and it just works the way it is.
Well, this type of professional environment is bound to be exceptionally stressful.
Right.
You know, like...
And arguing with the captain is a trope in detective movies all the time. But the way that they do it, it's just...
It's fun.
Yeah. Because there's no, like, I'm pulling you off the case, you know.
You got 24 hours to solve it.
Yeah. You're crazy. You're off the charts. We don't have the budget for your shenanigans, you know. Instead, it's just, have some kids. Get married. Another little detail that I love is... at the Joy's family, Terrence Howard and his wife, they haven't cleaned up since Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Throughout the kitchen, the living room, for like 6 days. So speaking of the captain and tropes or whatever, the movie, in order for a movie to exist in a genre, it has to have qualities of that genre, right? Otherwise it would be, you can't have a detective thriller without a detective
and thrills.
Twists and turns, you know, whatever. And there's a quote from a writer that I read in an article a long time ago that said something to the effect of, when you make like a romantic comedy, for example, you're not trying to convince your audience that this is the first time a boy has ever met a girl. You're just trying to tell a story that this is the first time this boy has met this girl. Right?
Valid. Which
Which is a cool way when writers are stuck, like, is this original or not? Like, the originality comes in the story that you are telling, not necessarily the framework around it that defines what genre the story is, right? Anyway, long-winded point to say, Prisoners adheres to the genre of suspense, thriller, detective, kidnapping, chase, but it uses the tropes and elevates them in a surprising way without going too far off the rails. So kind of what I was saying earlier, it's like, it's the version of this thing that we've seen many, many times before, but it is one of the best versions of it. As always, if you've seen Prisoners or you're going to watch it, let us know what you think in the comments. Also like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, because we are going to be putting out a new movie every Tuesday, and next week we are doing Stephen Sommers' The Mummy.
one of our longtime favorites.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. My name is Levi.
I am Patrick.
And this has been Levi and Patrick Went to the Movies, Denis Villeneuve's Prisoners.